I don't do these kind of intros nearly as much as I should, but this is a long video and there's a lot that I get into. There will be timestamps below. However, it's a long video because I explain a lot. So if you want to get the full explanation, just watch this at like 1.25 or 1.5x speed. Otherwise, timestamps will be linked below. Alright, so Ventures is tough. You have to start from scratch and you don't have any of your weapons, but you do get to keep your hero loadouts, and the main question I've been getting asked, besides what you should spend your weapon and hero voucher on, link to those below, is what loadout should I use, because it's kind of the only thing that carries over. You know, your base stats don't have any impact, these get cleared, but your other abilities stay the same, such as your upgrades. So your drone will still be maxed out, your adrenaline rush will still heal teammates, and these will scale down with the enemies that you're fighting, but drones are going to be very helpful, and supply drops are going to help you get items, and you can use heroes like that chick that reduces gadget time. I don't even know what she's called. Undercover Buzz reduces the cooldown by a lot, so if you want to get some easy materials in the very earliest missions that you run, you can put her in the support or in the lead for like a 1 minute 25-second cooldown on the supply drop, which was quoted to me by somebody in chat, so I don't know if that's the exact time, but heroes like this can help get started. And I bring this up because things change as you go along. Now, I'm not the highest power level in the world. I haven't been playing non-stop. I have been still moving house, you know, being with the family, doing things outside of the stream, so I haven't had time to make this video right away, but I'm glad that I waited because I have learned a few things, and that's that initially you want like an ability-based loadout, which is tough because you don't have a ton of energy. And that's interesting because I was going to make a Dragon Slash build for this, but that didn't really work out. I can show what I was using here, which is over there. I might have spoiled some of the builds, but I implore you to stay with me here. I will have timestamps below for the rest of these, but for my Dragon Slash loadout here, it didn't have enough energy to get started because the rage modifier that's active in this current one, in this current Ventures, makes it so that you don't have any energy, and every elimination or damage to enemies restores energy gradually, and then you can kind of use your abilities then. That might be different in the future, so, you know, I might make a new video for that if necessary, but I'm sure these loadouts will continue to carry over. But one thing that I'm hoping will be patched is Blakebeard Stash, because that is incredibly powerful in the early game, and literally, I think, broken, because we had the same issue in dungeons where the peg leg from that thing was hitting very, very hard, like way harder than it should be. And even at level 0, you know, power level 1, right where it starts you out, the peg leg was, I don't know what the power level was exactly, but it was in the 70s. It was already legendary, I think. It was very strong regardless, and it's very good for a while. Now, a lot of people didn't like that. They're like, oh, you're just going to cheese through everything with a peg leg build. But let me explain, because as you get further, other things kind of come to light where you don't really need the peg legs anymore. You have some better weapons. You can use a Shocktower or something, or you can use this loadout that I was using, which is kind of just a modified soldier build where I use tactical assault sledgehammer in the lead. I don't typically like to use them in my lead because I prefer the assault damage. I like to buff all of my damage rather than just my crits, and if you do the math, they're basically the same anyway. You can fight me on it, but I've had this argument quite a few times. There's like a 5% damage difference between Sledgehammer and Ramirez, and if you can figure that out without actually doing any math, if you can feel the difference, I'm going to call you a liar because that's ridiculous. My point is, I'm using Sledgehammer in the lead because a weapon that I found had double crit rating on it. You can see my Thrasher here actually doesn't have a crit damage perk. So depending on the weapons that you find out in the map itself, that can affect some of the more basic loadouts that you use. And that brings me to a follow-up to my other point, which was that you don't really need things that are overpowered like the peg legs in the late game, because here's a Luna loadout that I really enjoy using. And if you find a fast swinging melee like the Stabsworth, or one of the new vacuum tube weapons, maybe it has that chain lightning perk like my axe does, pretty happy to find that, you can use exactly, you know, a loadout like this. I'm going to link my soldier loadout and my ninja loadout in the description below. They are a bit old, and I might have missed some of the newer heroes, but I assure you that those videos are still relevant and will leave you with a very effective loadout. So I'm still going to link those below. You should totally check those out, along with the shotgun build, which is not just this. I explain why I use what heroes I use, and there's a lot more information in those specific videos. On that topic, I'm also going to address Swamp Knight and all of my other sort of happy holidays / abilities videos. I'm going to try to link them all because they're all kind of relevant. If you want to focus solely on minigun or solely on, you know, seismic smash or something like that, not all of those are going to be incredibly useful in Ventures, but I feel like if you're trying to explore some of the abilities in this game, you should check those out. And one caveat to every ability video flat out is Saurian Fight, because this new dino, I'm only putting him in to check this out, buffs ability damage. He only buffs about half of them. I did do an entire video video on him specifically, so I'll link that below. Yeah, you should totally check the pin comment on that video because he literally only works on half of the abilities, but he does affect Shocktower and T.E.D.D.Y, which we will be bringing up later. And to talk about Swamp Knight, I want to mention that a lot of people say he's really, really strong, but he kind of just falls off in the end game. My Swamp Knight video can't be covering anything that's not new. I feel like nothing's really changed about Swamp Knight. You put on the loadout and then you stand still and then everything just kind of dies and then you die in the later zone. So that can be good early on if you don't have Blakebeard's stash for the peg legs, but I don't really see a use for him. So that was an incredibly long intro, but I really wanted to get into like how this game plays out, and I want to talk about basically the starting loadout that I used, and that was Blakebeard stash can be pretty much used on anything. So the typical loadout is Swab the Deck to buff your club damage, which would be your peg legs. Avast Mates is your cannonball damage, which is nice. And then go in Coconuts because he's the only other viable hero. Unless you're using Buckle or Swash, I'm gonna leave you up to decide that, but I did personally find out that going Coconuts isn't wasted, as I always thought it was, seeing as you get Coconuts from the Blakebeard's, treasure chest. Why do you need him? Well, he doesn't enable the ability to find Coconuts only. He also is responsible for that 16% damage buff. So if you're not using Crossbones Barrett in the support, your Coconuts won't actually be buffing your damage, which is kind of a big deal. 16% damage is a lot to lose out on if you don't need to. So this is the cookie cutter loadout that I recommend. And a lot of people have been asking me if they should use their hero voucher on Blakebeard the Blackhearted, and it's a hard maybe. If you really, really want to use peg legs and you want to use Blakebeard stash in Ventures, I guess, but if you have made it far enough in Ventures to even unlock that hero voucher to go get Blakehearted, you probably don't need him anymore, and you can probably use one of the other builds I'll be mentioning later. And it's very important to note there are a lot of fantastic heroes in the game, namely the Dino heroes, which as of recording and likely the upload date, a lot of dinos are here right now. So I already mentioned that the video on my voucher spending video will be linked below. It highly recommends dinos and Crossbones Barrett for that matter, but the dinos are here right now. Do not spend a voucher on that, and whether or not you want to spend it on Blakebeard is totally up to you and how many heroes you have. He will be very helpful in the early game, I'm not going to lie to you, but I think your voucher is better spent elsewhere. Also check the pinned comment of that video because I do update it as new heroes are released, rather than just re-recording the video every few months. As for the loadout that I'm actually using here, Trailblazer Quinn is something I kind of went with because, as I said, you can use Blakebeard stash with anything. You do not need to spec into T.E.D.D.Y, but I found it to be pretty useful, and she also has a Shocktower, which is kind of fun to have. Fragment Generation is something I'll be using later as well because Fragment Flurry Jess is also quite helpful. I like her a lot. Every 39 eliminations you get a Charge Fragment, which kind of reduces the time and might buff your damage. I am not well versed on what Charge Fragments even do. Somebody who has done a lot more research than I have can say it in the comments below, but importantly, it allows you to use your ability with the Charge Fragment, meaning you do not require the energy to use it, and that is a big deal because with no energy on my character, I can just throw down a T.E.D.D.Y or a Shocktower whenever I want, thus negating the rage modifier so long as I have her support perk activated, and that is very cool and something I've been getting a lot of use out of. And then Fuel for the Fallen is something I also have because, well, 39 eliminations is a lot, and you don't always have a Charge Fragment. So every time you get an elimination, you get to have extra energy being generated, and he has been bugged for like always. He's supposed to give you 18 total energy over 3 seconds, so 6 energy per second in the lead, but he's been doing that in the support forever, and Epic's been pretty okay about fixing this stuff in the past, and I really think they just left him alone on this one on purpose because that's not even that broken. Like, that's not that bad. 6 energy per second upon elimination is really not that much energy anyway. It's just enough to barely even use the energy that he gives you, in my experience, so please, Epic, either never fix that or just make his team perk stronger, because he's doing plenty in support right now, and I don't think it's broken, and so as of now, he's actually a pretty good pick. If they ever fix that, then there are heroes like Anti-Cuddle Sarah, where you can get the melee elimination energy. That's not a lot, and the only other thing that I can really think of that's not new, I'll talk about him in a second, is the Outlander. So you're not going to have no shield all the time, so Dino Southie's not necessarily going to help you, but Dennis is a thing, and I am glad that he ties into this really well because people have been asking me about Dennis. I like him. I don't think he's overpowered. I don't think he should be your lead. I tried him as my lead. I wasn't terribly impressed. There is actually a fun build where you can use him and then Fumble, and then, oh, if I can find him, all of the heroes will be right here. Yeah, Present Arms, which is Jolly Headhunter. What does she even do? Yeah, Jolly Headhunter, where every elimination has a chance to give you presents, which give you all of these different buffs, and you can have the footballs for the totally rocking out, or Dennis for the burgers, which are currently untextured, but not my point. My point is that they give you not only health, but also energy. So they're actually pretty good. Like they're kind of all right. If in the future Fuel for the Fallen is patched or you don't have him, just use Dennis. You get him from the venture rewards anyway, and he's kind of good. He's kind of good. I'm pleasantly surprised to say that Epic released a hero that's not terrible. It's not bad at all. It's actually quite good. So I'm not going to personally use him because, like I mentioned, there are alternatives that I'm frankly more personally comfortable using, but he is certainly a consideration, and I got to fix this loadout because the next time I stream, I'm going to forget that I recorded a video and it will be broken. But yeah, Dennis is a good consideration. Now, this other build, I'm sorry I spent so much time on the last one, is pretty much the full version of this half build. This half build basically works in Blakebeard stash and makes it kind of a hybrid build. This is going all in on Fragment, Flurry, Jess, where now it's every 13 eliminations gives you a charge fragment, and oh my goodness, can you spam Shocktowers and T.E.D.D.Y like crazy. There are a couple of things that you can change here, but I want to mention the important ones. First off, we're using Blast from the Past. You are going to take a lot of damage always, and especially if you're using abilities like Shocktower, you are going to be in the thick of the fight a lot. Blast from the Past is a fantastic team perk. I highly recommend it. Now, Saurian Fight affects T.E.D.D.Y and Shocktower. I said I'd mention him later, and that's just great. I mean, that's just a straight up damage buff. That's, you know, solid. Now, because most of your activation of your abilities is going to be coming from Fragment Flurry with those charge fragments, you don't maybe need Saurian Focus. I didn't test this personally, but if you find out that you're able to spam your abilities and you're not really relying on energy other than the energy that you're getting from eliminations, you can actually go with a better perk here. Saurian Hide would keep you alive. That's great. Saurian Vigor, if she gets buffed, will be useful because right now coconuts are going to be your main source of healing. She's kind of useless. Or if you're a melee user, use Saurian Claws. If you're using a ranged weapon that you found that you really enjoy, use Saurian Might. There are a lot of options here, except for the Constructor. He's useless. You won't have kinetic overload if you're running an Outlander, so you can kind of trash him. If I find that I don't need focus, I'll probably use Iza, because that 33 armor essentially gives you a lot of extra health. It basically gives you, if you have 1,000,000 health, for example, Saurian armor is basically like 333,000 health. You basically just take 1/3 of your health, add it on top, and that's how much damage is going to be reduced, because your damage is going to be reduced by 33%-ish. It's hard to explain armor, but she's very, very nice. You will die a lot less. And then pressing charges is cool because I use my voucher on Gumshoe. Tic Tac made a video on her here showing that she's very, very strong. I'll link that because he went way deeper than I'm going to in this video, but suffice it to say, if I have an entire loadout based around charge fragments and their abilities, then pressing charges is very good. That's literally a 30% damage buff, which is quite nice. Now, there are a lot of options here. You can use Cyberclops, which I hate. I don't personally like using him because that 20% chance to do 58% damage is like, in my head, it was like 11%. Nobody corrected me, so I'm rolling with it, but it's basically like an 11% damage buff, assuming that math is correct. But even if it's incorrect and he's a little bit better, 20% if you're just, I don't know, that only affects your Shocktower, which I didn't like at first, but then I realized that I just went with Static Cling anyway, which buffs your Shocktower Affliction. It's just as good as Cyberclops as I understand it, or better. 50% damage with Affliction, you know, over time, it's pretty solid. I like them a lot. And there are so many things here. If you prefer looting and farming, like I mentioned earlier, use Gadgeteer or Under Warranty to buff your T.E.D.D.Y, or literally any of this. Just scroll through and find whatever might work for you. There is a lot of variability here, and I'm not going to tell you any one thing. Just that if you do want to spend a voucher and you're like me, who literally has every hero in the game, you guys. So if you're super late game and you got nothing else to spend it on, go Gumshoe. I even want to add that Art Deco hasn't even fully released yet, so Gumshoe might be around the corner depending on when you're watching this video. So if you want to spend your voucher like I did, she's a great option, but like I said, you can just scroll and find something that might work here. Hell, you could use Static Cling like I did and Under Warranty to buff your T.E.D.D.Y, or I could just buff both with Gumshoe. And then, as I mentioned, going coconuts is almost a must if you're using Blast from the Past. It gives you 30% or so of your health in one coconut and heals you over the course of like 20 to 30 seconds and buffs your damage by 16%. It's a great perk that I use every time I use Blast from the Past, pretty much without exception. And this brings me to kind of a fun loadout, which is really hyped up by my friend Choo Choo. I mean, not so much. He didn't use it so much in the later game, but if you want just a fun ability that I haven't personally made a video on, then hey, Shuriken Llama and all of the Shuriken friends can come together. I don't do this a lot in my videos, and I really feel like I should, where I don't actually show the heroes that buff these in case you guys don't know who they are. But if you want to use Shurikens, this is okay. My advice is to shoot some enemies, hit some enemies with a melee, build up that energy, and then use the Shurikens on the heavy targets like Mist Monsters and Fatties and Smashers or whatever you got. But this is kind of just a fun early game build that we tried out when we were messing around. And while he did have some success with the Shurikens, this is sort of an equivalent to like my Dragon Slash build, which seemed like a good idea, but didn't totally work out, except that the Shurikens have a little bit more play. And that brings me to my final point, and I'm not really going to go too deep into these because, as I mentioned, I have videos on all 3 of these loadouts. Again, they will not look identical to this if you watch my videos because I go into them a lot deeper in their own topics. But if you do find a weapon, you know, a melee or a ranged weapon that you are really enjoying using, then perhaps you want to consider a soldier loadout that buffs your AR or SMG damage, or an Outlander which buffs your pistol and SMG damage. So if you didn't know, people like Tactical Assault Sledgehammer actually have a total doppelganger. If I can find her without skipping over it, Jess is the same bonus. She buffs your pistol and SMG critical damage. It's the same thing. So if you don't have any of these heroes, maybe there's some alternatives, but I highly recommend using a build like this if you got an SMG or an AR that you like, or a build like this if you like melees, and then watch those full videos if you want a complete answer. I actually threw on the shotgun loadout when I found a good shotgun, but this is more relevant to the late game once you really start getting going and finding weapons that you enjoy using. But just like the weapon video, this took a lot longer than I thought it would because there's a lot to get into and I didn't want to leave anything out. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys really want to support me, feel free to use code Mista to check out. You know, thank you, Boogie, down there. I don't love it when people whisper me, but if you say something nice like that, I won't get too mad. I don't love it when people whisper me. I just really appreciate it if you don't. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys want to become a channel member, you know, you can check it out there. You know, join button, link below, everything. You guys get some nice rewards. Hope you guys enjoyed, and thanks for watching. And then